Alright, this is the last video in a Jak marathon that I'm doing, so if you haven't watched the previous reviews that I did, then I'd recommend you fix that by starting with my Jak and Daxter review. Anywho, finally we have reached the end of the series for the PlayStation 2, and oddly enough we're ending things with a game that wasn't even developed by Naughty Dog. High Impact Games are the developers. Obviously, I will only be taking a look at the PlayStation 2 version, as I haven't played the PSP version. In fact, I don't even have a PSP. I knew really nothing about this game before I played it, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. Though I was surprised to see that the title was Jak and Daxter rather than just Jak. That's, interesting. So join me for a moment, and together we'll see if Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier is worth playing. First things first, that story. Things begin with Jak, Daxter, and Kira flying around trying to find a reason to the eco shortage. While in the air, they soon get attacked by a sky pirate named Phoenix. They manage to get rid of the sky pirates, but during the encounter their plane received too much damage and ends up crashing on an island in an area referred to as the Brink. Apparently, the Brink is somewhere at the edge of the world. It isn't too long before they get their plane working again and come across some more sky pirates attacking another ship. Saving the ship from the sky pirates, its captain, Duke Skyheed, thanks them and invites them to Europa. Accepting his offer, they are given an item called the Eco Seeker. Currently, it doesn't work, but Kira is given a week to study it. However, before they can get things really started, Phoenix returns with his fellow sky pirates and ends up stealing both the Eco Seeker and Kira. Now it's up to Jak to retrieve the Eco Seeker and save his friend, so they can go back to fixing the eco shortage problem. That's about as far as I'll get into the story, because after that we start getting into spoiler territory. One thing that I really like off the bat about the story is that it focuses on Jak, Daxter, and Kira. Not to really hate too much on Jak 3, but I was a little disappointed to see Kira get so little attention in that game, especially since she's still Jak's friend and has been in the series since the beginning. Plus here, they do her character justice, as you can definitely tell she's grown a more mature personality and is still a great engineer. Not only that, but you also see her being more level-headed and even acting a bit diplomatic. Jak is pretty good too, as he's willing to help others and works well off of Kira. There's just something complimentary about their personalities in this game. Daxter is of course the smart-mouth goofball, though I really wouldn't say he has very many standout moments in this game, or any funny lines. The new characters, on the other hand, are, for the most part, very forgettable. I mean, the Duke is rather boring, I can't really remember too much in terms of personality from the castaway they find, and I just can't seem to recall any other minor characters. The exception to this is Phoenix, the sky pirate. Phoenix is honestly really great. He's a bit cocky and suave, making him a good counter to Jak. There are some really entertaining moments between these two, and these are easily the best moments in the game for me. The story itself is alright. It's simple, focused, and has a few good moments, but isn't anything super special. It does its job rather well, and that's all it needs to do for me to like it. What confuses me is when the story is supposed to be taking place. I mean, it's pretty obvious it takes place after Jak 2, but whether things are taking place after Jak 3 or Jak X Combat Racing, I couldn't tell you. Though, to be fair, it's not important since this is its own standalone story. Well, with that out of the way, it's time to talk about gameplay. It turns out the game has a very similar gameplay style to that of Jak 2 and 3. Your usual suspects are here, missions you have to do, an open world to navigate, guns, and some platforming. Though there are some notable differences here. For example, Jak can't roll in this game, which is a slight annoyance for me, especially since I really enjoyed using his roll jump technique in previous games. Before we talk about any more changes to Jak, let's quickly talk about the missions. You will progress through the game by completing missions that will be marked on a minimap. Most of the missions fall under two different categories: missions with platforming and gun combat, or flying missions. The platforming in the game is pretty decent. It's not as great as previous games, but a part of that has to do with the slight janky and stiffness of how Jak feels. There are some cool moments though, and the gunplay is okay, but nothing all that special. Though there is a reason for that, but we'll talk more about that later. Now, what about those flying missions? After all, I'm not a fan of the hover vehicles in previous games, so how are these planes? Well, they're actually pretty alright. In these missions, you will mostly be shooting down other planes and destroying bigger ones, or chasing someone down some narrow pathways. While it can take a while to destroy larger planes, it's still something I don't mind too much. It's chasing other planes that I don't like as much, as I find these sections have some rather poor layouts. You see, it was a flying mission where I had to chase down a main villain towards the end of the game that eventually caused me to just stop playing because the layout of this section to me was quite full of bullshit. A part of this involved making sure that you were a certain distance away from the enemy plane because eventually these doors would start to close. But before these doors would start to close, these annoying arms would come out from the walls that you had to shoot in order to get out of the way, otherwise you would automatically take damage no matter where you were. And to me, this is a great example of the worst layout in the game for these particular sections. These chasing sections are just poorly laid out, as these obstacles you're supposed to be dodging don't time very well with the distance and speed you're supposed to be maintaining behind the opponent vehicle. There are moments where you'll have to throw Daxter onto other planes, and these sections are also a bit annoying, as the slightest mistake fucks everything up, as there's very little leniency here. The planes themselves control rather well. As you play through the game, you'll unlock new planes that you can use that each have slightly different ways they fly. For example, there is one such plane where all you have to do is press a button for it to automatically start boosting. Plus, by destroying sky pirates, you can get scrap metal that can be used to upgrade your planes, like getting them new weapons or powering up weapons and giving the planes better defenses. There's some nice customization here that I actually kinda rather like. While you are doing missions, you will fly around the sandbox world where there are specific locations you can land planes, as well as some challenges you can do in both the open world and in a couple of towns you can visit. These challenges will reward you with precursor orbs that are used to unlock secrets. Personally, I didn't really go for these since the challenges aren't that great, which is a shame as there isn't too many other optional things you can do in the open world like in the previous games. Though, to be fair, with how this one is set up, I can see why they went with this option. Let's move on to the gunplay. You basically get the same guns you got back in Jak 2, like the rifle, the Vulcan Fury, the shotgun, and instead of that purple orb gun, you get a grenade launcher. The guns are fine, and are pretty helpful against larger enemies and boss fights, and as you play through the game, you'll come across these chests that'll give your gun some more ammo. Not only that, but there are some chests that'll give you different costumes for Jak, which is kind of a fun idea to me. They're simply cosmetic and are pretty harmless. After you beat up enemies, you'll get some Dark Eco, which has an all-new purpose in this game. Because there is this eco instability, Jak can no longer turn into Dark Jak, which probably has you curious as what you're supposed to do with Dark Eco now. Well, that's where Kira comes in. You see, by talking to Kira, she can upgrade Jak's skills by spending so much Dark Eco. This is freaking awesome, as she can make Jak's melee attack stronger, make it to where he can deflect enemy projectiles with his spin attack, and even give him some more health. It's because of this feature that I ended up not using my guns for weaker enemies, and primarily used my punch since I was able to upgrade that to being so powerful. Jak's punch can even be upgraded to where he has the ability to shoot out a ball of energy, though I do find it annoying that when Jak throws a punch he slides like 5 feet forward. This is really only a problem since they give you now a projectile attack to his punch. It's much more easier to get a bit of an aim for this thing if he just stood still. This upgrading feature is a really great addition, and it even has the added bonus of really making each playthrough personal. You can choose which kind of upgrade you want to go with, or even set your own handicaps, depending on how difficult you want the game to be for yourself. This game also does something that I was hoping the other games would do, and that's expand on Jak's eco powers. You see, as you progress through the game, Jak will get all new eco powers that are pretty useful in certain situations. I mean, first you get this red orb that once you shoot it will explode and do some nice damage to nearby enemies and is used for destroying boulders. Although I don't know why, but for me personally, I always forgot if it was the L2 or R2 button. This was always mixing me up, but that's just me. When standing next to these green crystals, Jak becomes an earthbender and causes these crystal pillars to appear to help him reach certain areas. This one is honestly one of my favorites as it leads to some very fun platforming moments. While standing over these yellow vents, Jak can use some kind of rocket jump to reach higher areas that is also actually kind of fun. And lastly, Jak will also get the ability to slow down time. Personally, I didn't enjoy this power mostly because the platforming sections where it was used were only okay at best and absolutely aggravating, with one mission in particular that pissed me off. Though, to be fair, the slowdown ability can be pretty useful against bosses. Quick side note here, the bosses are just alright, but they do still offer a pretty decent challenge. But these new eco powers are a great idea and really help make the platforming in the game feel just a little more unique. Throughout the game, there are a few moments where you will play as Daxter, who after being exposed to more dark eco, becomes Dark Daxter. Yeah, it sounds rather stupid and yeah, it is. These sections aren't bad, they're just not very good. Jak and Daxter doesn't have really great combat options. I mean, he can shoot orbs at enemies, pound his fist in the ground that is honestly only used for panel switches, and he can turn into a tornado that consumes dark eco but is best used against breaking down walls. That, and when you do use this tornado to take out multiple enemies, you'll find that the controls are rather awkward and it's a bit spastic, which I guess is to be expected. The Daxter sections have some slow but simple problem solving, like throwing spiders at pumps to slow them down, or switching around turrets. Again, they aren't bad, I just don't think that they're necessary, especially since I feel like they come out of nowhere and have little to no impact on what's going on in the story. Oh, and these sections aren't very visually appealing either. In fact, the game itself is a visual mixed bag. The locations and environments look pretty good, and they have some decent detail to them and some nice colors. Hell, there are some really cool locations here, like a town that's under a cliff, and I really do like being in an all-new area to see more of the world that Jak and Daxter inhabit. Character models, on the other hand, look weird and are just off to me. I think it has something to do with the faces, as these in particular just don't look right. It also doesn't help that the animations are noticeably janky too. As for the music, it's okay. Well, we're going to go to some spoilers here, so if you want to avoid them, then click to this time section shown now. Great, now that that's out of the way, early on when Jak meets up with Phoenix to try to save Kira, he finds out that she really wasn't in danger at all. Phoenix is actually helping Kira restore the Eco Seeker by finding its missing parts. It turns out that Phoenix used to be a commander of the European Air Forces and had worked for the Duke. However, once he found out that the Duke was experimenting with dark eco to make new soldiers, Phoenix left the Air Force and even kidnapped the lead scientist who had been working on the Duke's projects. Now, if any of this is sounding a bit familiar, well, that'd probably be because the Duke's Dark Soldier plan is pretty much the same as Paraxis's plan. Though, the Duke is just trying to make his people the most powerful in the world, so he's not as interesting or as complex as Paraxis. Anyway, Jak, Kira, and Phoenix all work together to put a stop to the Duke's plan, and in doing so, Phoenix ends up dying, sacrificing himself to save everyone else. Kira ends up getting the Eco Seeker working, and they manage to restore the eco imbalance, and then there's a bit of a teaser of them going on some more adventures, but that's about it. Like I said, it's a simple and rather straightforward story, and you know, I don't think the ending's too bad. It has a decent arc for Phoenix, who I really liked, Kira growing more into an eco-sage, and Jak and Daxter helping save the world again. Okay, not the whole world, but you know what I mean. So, would I recommend Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier? If you enjoyed the previous Jak games, then yes. This game isn't anything amazing, but it adds some nice new touches to the formula set up in Jak 2 and 3, like giving Jak new eco powers and being able to upgrade his skills. Missions are okay, with some being rather fun, but most I'd say are just alright. Sure, we could have gone without the Dark Daxter sections, and certain flying missions sucked as well. That, and Jak could have used some more smoothing out of his controls to make him feel just a little less awkward. Despite all that, it's a pretty decent game that I don't regret playing, and would like to see some of these features in a main series game. To be completely honest, I ended up enjoying this game more than I expected myself to. So what are my thoughts of the Jak series altogether? Well, I'm sure at this point you've managed to figure out that my favorite game in the series is still the first game. For me, the first Jak and Daxter is the most fun I've had with the series, while the rest of the games were just mixed bags. I don't really hate any of them. Well, okay, maybe I hate Jak 2 because of how frustrating it'd get, but I don't really love them either. And honestly, that also pretty much sums up how I feel about Naughty Dog. I've never really understood why people love them so much, because for me, they've just been okay. I guess my biggest problem with Naughty Dog is that when I see something that's a really good mechanic or idea in a game, I'd like to see them expand upon that, or add mechanics that I would think help benefit it. But instead, I often see them add things that I think hinder the experience. For a good example, I would take a look at my favorite of their Crash games, that being Crash 2. Crash 2 has some nice controls, and there are some fun levels with good layouts, and the hub world is a good way to navigate and allowing you to choose which levels you want to play in any order, as well as a few levels to help add some variety to the gameplay that are never really too intrusive, and without too many of them being there, though the final boss is quite shit. and there are some other complaints too. The levels could use some more variety in their themes and aesthetics, as well as just more levels in general. Not only that, but there are moments when levels will diverge in two different paths, and sometimes you'll have to backtrack, something the camera and the game in itself just doesn't really complement, and I've never really understood the idea of the crate system. Breaking the crates is fun, but in this game they can go a little overboard about the whole completion aspect, and it's something that just never appealed to me. And while I can kinda understand why they introduced the purple crystals, because there are certain levels that, again, divulge into two different paths, this is something that just ends up making those levels annoying should you have to miss that purple crystal that doesn't allow you to progress. I do understand that my criticism towards Naughty Dog could be almost labeled to any other developing group, and there are no developers out there that are perfect. But for me personally, it's that Naughty Dog has these great ideas, and I just never really see them fully utilize them. And that's just something I find to be a bit frustrating. I would have to say though that I kind of find myself enjoying the Jak series a little bit more than the Sly series. They're both good series, but the ideas that Jak introduces seem to complement its gameplay style better than the Sly series. More importantly, those open worlds. While I don't think Naughty Dog ever took full advantage of the sandbox worlds in Jak's 2 and 3, I still think it complements that gameplay style much more better than it did in Sly 2 and 3. Now keep in mind, I'm only judging Naughty Dog from what I've played. I can't really comment on the Uncharted series or The Last of Us, as I haven't played those games, and as far as I know, they could have improved. I just can't say so for certain. Though at the same time, at the moment, these games just don't interest me. But I can't really judge Naughty Dog based upon those until I actually play them. Well, that's all I really have to say for the Jak series. It's an all-around pretty good series. Nothing that I'd say is all that impressive, but it's an experience worth giving a shot, and, you know, nothing I'd say you'd really regret giving a try, as again, there are some really great ideas here. And there are fun moments as well. Why don't we go ahead and take a bit of a break from some action platforming games for the time being, and why don't we take a bit of a focus now on some RPG related games. But what RPG game should I try first? You know, why don't we start things off with a bit more of an infamous game amongst the fans. Something that will definitely show a different light of how I feel about certain games under certain circumstances. I'll see you all then.